The paper hit the metal desk, with a sound like a slamming cell door. $60,000 worth of high-end inventory was gone from the cold storage unit. Every single number in the audit report pointed directly at one man. Elias stood in the middle of the warehouse office. Behind him, the heavy machinery hummed, and his coworkers suddenly found reasons to look very closely at their clipboards. "You have exactly 5 minutes to clean out your locker and get off my floor." Marcus, the senior floor manager, did not even bother to look up from his tablet when he said it. Elias did not beg for his job. He did not raise his voice, or try to explain that he was not the one who signed off on that manifest. He calmly unclipped his security badge and placed it quietly on the metal desk. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument could have ever been. "Before we go any further into what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that doing the right thing still matters, even when it costs you everything, claim it right now in the comments by typing, 'I stand for the truth.' Make sure you hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because this story is just getting started." Weeks before the missing inventory and the long walk back to the employee parking lot, Elias lived the kind of quiet life that most people completely ignore. He worked the graveyard shift at Vanguard Logistics. He routed pallets of luxury goods and double-checked temperature gauges in a massive concrete building on the industrial edge of the city. He drove a beat-up sedan that had over 200,000 miles on the dash and a transmission that slipped in second gear. When the other guys ordered pizza on Friday nights, Elias always unpacked a cold sandwich from home. Home was a cramped one-bedroom apartment with a radiator that hissed loudly all winter long. But out on the tiny concrete balcony, Elias had built something truly beautiful. He had set up a small hydroponic garden and a customized koi pond, using scrap materials and sheer determination. "Dad, you are giving the fish way too much food again." Leo was 8 years old and absolutely certain about how the world worked. Elias smiled and handed the little plastic cup of pellets to his son. "You are right, buddy. You take over." Leo took his job very seriously, carefully measuring out the exact amount just like his dad taught him. That was their deal. Elias wanted Leo to understand that being poor did not mean being defeated. He taught his son that a man is only as good as his word. He taught him that if you can grow life in a concrete box, you can survive anywhere. The money was always incredibly tight for them. The hospital bills from his late wife's illness had wiped out every single dime they ever managed to save. There was a basic health plan through the warehouse that barely covered Leo's asthma medication. The math at the end of the month never quite worked out in their favor, no matter how hard Elias budgeted. Marcus, the guy running the warehouse floor, made sure things stayed difficult for Elias. Marcus had this terrible habit of standing just a little too close, constantly reminding the floor crew how easily they could be replaced. He hated anyone who did not laugh at his bad jokes or stroke his fragile ego. He particularly hated Elias because Elias just put his head down and did the work flawlessly. Marcus had been trying to push Elias out for months so he could bring in his own cousin for the supervisor spot. He just needed the perfect excuse to make it happen. Let us go back to the night everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday, right around 2 in the morning. Elias was doing his routine walk through the high-value cold storage sector. He noticed something completely off about the ambient air. Immediately, the digital thermostat read 34 degrees, but the condensation on the metal racks told a completely different story. The air smelled thick, almost sweet, which only happened when the Freon lines were completely starved of pressure. Elias had spent years calibrating the delicate temperature of his fish tanks at home. He knew exactly what a 3-degree fluctuation felt like on his bare skin. He knew how quickly a closed ecosystem could completely collapse if the filtration cycled off for even a single hour. "Hey Marcus, the ambient cooling cycle in Sector 4 is dragging hard. We need to log an emergency maintenance ticket right now, before the ambient heat ruins the entire batch of inventory." Marcus walked over slowly, chewing on a cheap toothpick, and barely even glanced at the digital gauge. "The main screen says it is perfectly fine. Elias, stop trying to play the hero engineer and go sweep the loading dock like you are actually paid to do. Elias hesitated, listening to the agonizing hum of a compressor that was clearly failing. He knew Marcus was dead wrong, but he also knew Marcus was actively looking for a reason to fire him for insubordination. He turned around and walked away to grab a broom. By 7 o'clock the next morning, the entire pallet of imported pharmaceuticals was completely gone. It was spoiled and missing from the digital system entirely. Marcus immediately filed an incident report, claiming Elias had manually bypassed the cooling circuit and stolen the inventory during his shift. Which brings us right back to the parking lot. Elias walked out into the harsh morning sun, with his belongings packed into a small cardboard box. His chest was tight with the panic of wondering how he was going to buy Leo's inhaler next week. He walked past the reserved executive parking spaces, a long row of shiny cars that cost more than he would make in a lifetime. That was when he saw it. Sitting right on the hood of a sleek black luxury sedan was a gold pocket watch. It was not just any watch. It was a vintage, heavily engraved timepiece that looked like it belonged in a museum display. Elias looked around the empty concrete parking lot. The security guard was nowhere to be found. He knew exactly whose car this was. It belonged to Olivia Sterling, the CEO and founder of Vanguard Logistics. She was the exact same woman who had just signed off on his termination papers an hour ago. He stood there for a very long time, staring at the gold medal. He could just walk away and let someone else steal it. He could take it to a pawn shop and easily pay his rent for the next 3 solid years. A man who had just been branded a thief by this exact company had every justification to take what the universe was handing him. But then, he thought about the little balcony garden and the hard lessons he had drilled into his son's head. If you compromise your integrity when it is hard, you never really had any to begin with. Listen to me carefully right now. If you refuse to let a cruel world turn you into a bitter person, let it be known to the universe. Declare it in the comments by typing, "I stand for the truth." Make sure you subscribe right now, because you need to see how this decision changes absolutely everything. Elias picked up the heavy gold watch. He felt the cold metal in his palm and quietly slipped it into his jacket pocket. He got into his beat-up car and drove straight home. He made Leo a grilled cheese sandwich and helped him with his math homework. As if his entire world had not just collapsed, he did not sleep a single wink that night. The next morning, Elias put on his only clean dress shirt. He drove straight back to the massive corporate headquarters he no longer worked for. He walked into the pristine marble lobby, completely ignoring the suspicious glares from the front desk staff. He politely asked to speak directly with the office of the CEO. The receptionist laughed out loud and told him to wait in the corner while she called security. But before the armed guards could arrive, the private elevator doors chimed open. Olivia Sterling stepped out, surrounded by a swarm of nervous executives. She looked absolutely exhausted, carrying a heavy leather briefcase and barking angry orders at her legal team. Elias stepped right into her path. A security guard grabbed his arm, but Elias did not even flinch. "Miss Sterling, you left this on the hood of your car yesterday." He held out his calloused hand, opening his fingers to reveal the gold pocket watch. The executives in the lobby completely froze. The expensive Italian leather briefcases stopped swinging. Olivia Sterling stared at the heavy gold watch, resting in the palm of a man wearing a faded flannel shirt. Her eyes darted from the timepiece up to Elias's face. The harsh lines of stress around her mouth suddenly softened into sheer confusion. She knew exactly who he was. She had signed his termination paperwork, not even 24 hours ago. "I fired you yesterday," she said, her voice dropping to a quiet, bewildered whisper. "Yes, ma'am, you did," Elias replied evenly. He didn't pull his hand back. "But you left this on your car. And it belongs to you." Olivia slowly reached out and took the watch. She ran her thumb over the engraved casing. This watch had belonged to her grandfather, the man who started the entire company from a single delivery truck. It was completely irreplaceable. "Why didn't you sell it?" she asked, genuinely baffled. "I took your livelihood away. You owe me absolutely nothing." Elias looked her dead in the eye. because I have an 8-year-old boy at home, and I promised him that no matter how hard things get, we don't take shortcuts. And we don't take what isn't ours. I also came here to look you in the eye and tell you that I did not steal your inventory. Olivia didn't say a word. She just stared at him for a long moment, reading the quiet, unbending dignity in his posture. Then, she turned to the massive security guard hovering behind Elias. "Step back," she ordered. She looked back at Elias. "Come upstairs with me. Right now." The executive suite was a massive expanse of glass and polished steel. Olivia walked straight to her heavy oak desk and tossed her briefcase onto the leather chair. Spread out across the center of the desk were the incident reports from the warehouse theft, glossy photographs of the empty cold storage racks. "My senior manager says you bypassed the breaker and moved the pallets out the back," Olivia said, leaning against the desk. "He says the system shows a manual override." Elias glanced down at the paperwork. His eyes immediately caught the temperature graph printed on the top page. It was a line chart showing the ambient cooling data from Sector 4. He frowned, leaning in a little closer. "Do you know how to read these?" Olivia asked. "I don't have a college degree, Miss Sterling," Elias said, tapping his thick finger against the sharp downward spike on the printed graph. "But I know how closed ecosystems work. I build hydroponic gardens. I keep koi fish. And I know for an absolute fact that this chart is a lie." Olivia stood up straight. "Explain." Elias traced the sharp line on the paper. "This shows the ambient temperature dropping 10 degrees in 3 minutes. That is physically impossible from a manual breaker on the warehouse floor. If I pulled the power down there, the freon would slowly bleed out over an hour. The temperature would curve, not drop like a rock." He looked up at her, his voice steady and certain. "The only way a commercial cooling unit purges that violently is if the central server sends an emergency flush command. You can't do that from the floor. You have to trigger it from an executive terminal. Someone crashed the temperature on purpose to force an emergency evacuation of the sector, giving them a 30-minute blind spot to move those pallets out of the loading bay." Olivia's face went completely pale. She turned around, practically diving toward her computer keyboard. Her fingers flew across the keys as she bypassed the standard manager reports and pulled up the raw, unfiltered server logs from Tuesday night. She scrolled down to 2 in the morning. There it was, a digital footprint, glowing brightly on the screen. An emergency purge had been triggered remotely, and the ID badge used to authorize that command didn't belong to a floor worker. It was a level 5 executive clearance. It belonged to Marcus. 10 minutes later, the heavy glass door of the office swung open. Marcus walked in, with a smug, arrogant smile plastered across his face. He assumed the CEO wanted to congratulate him for catching the warehouse thief so quickly, but the moment he saw Elias standing quietly in the corner of the room, his smile completely evaporated. "Marcus," Olivia said, her voice dripping with ice. She turned the computer monitor around so he could see the screen. "You have exactly one chance to tell me where my $60,000 of pharmaceuticals are before I have the federal authorities arrest you. Right here in this office," Marcus stammered. He tried to point a finger at Elias, tried to spin a frantic lie about computer glitches and hacked passwords, but the panic in his eyes gave him away instantly. He was a small, greedy man who had finally been backed into a corner he couldn't bully his way out of. Olivia didn't even raise her voice. She simply pressed a button on her phone. 2 corporate security guards stepped into the office, grabbed Marcus by both arms, and dragged him out of the room. He was fired on the spot, and his files were handed directly to the police. 2 days later, Elias was sitting on his tiny concrete balcony, helping Leo measure out the fish food for the koi pond. A sleek black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb in front of their run-down apartment building. Olivia Sterling stepped out. She didn't look like a terrifying CEO today. She just looked like a person. She walked up the concrete stairs and knocked on their door. When Elias opened it, she looked past him and saw the beautiful, thriving green plants growing out of scrap materials on the balcony. She saw Leo looking up at her with wide, curious eyes. "I came to apologize," Olivia said softly. I let a corrupt manager run my floor because I wasn't paying close enough attention. And it almost cost me, the most honest man in my entire company. She handed Elias a thick envelope. That is your back pay, plus a bonus for saving my grandfather's watch. Before he could argue, she held up her hand. And I'm not here to give you your old job back. The guy running my logistics facility just got arrested. I need someone who actually understands how things work. And more importantly, someone who isn't afraid to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. She offered him the position of director of facility operations. The salary was more money than Elias had ever seen in his entire life. It meant a real house. It meant Leo's medical bills were gone forever. It meant they were finally safe. Elias looked back at his son, who was holding the little cup of fish food and smiling. Elias had told him that doing the right thing would always pay off, even when it was incredibly hard. Now, his son got to watch that lesson become a reality. Sometimes, life pushes you right to the absolute edge. People will underestimate you, look down on you, and try to make you pay for their mistakes. But a strong man doesn't break. A good father doesn't bend his morals just because he is tired. You hold on to your integrity, because eventually, the truth always rises to the surface. If you believe that integrity is the most valuable thing a person can own, and that honesty will always defeat greed in the end, declare it right now in the comments by typing, "I stand for the truth." Make sure you subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that good guys do win in the end.